Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Every now and again, I want to make something that has letters on it that are a little bit bigger than what you can do with a stamp, and maybe something in a little bit of a different font as well. And so I'm going to show you one way to do that today. We'll be embossing them with the rolling mill. Technically it's debossing because embossing is where you're raising something up. We're going to be impressing into a piece of sheet. But we're going to pre-make some letters, solder them to a base plate so they're backwards, and when we roll it through the rolling mill at the right pressure, it should emboss those right into the piece of sheet. And then we can make a little something out of it. So I have found it occasionally useful, and I hope that you do as well. But before we do that, I wanted to thank some groups of people. Number one, I want to thank my patrons over on Patreon. And I have a new one, Diane A. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate your support. I think that you'll find it's a great group of people over there who are really supportive, and also a whole bunch of talented artists who have skills that you can tap into. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And thanks to all my previous patrons as well. You guys really make my day sometimes. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 24,900, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate the nice comments that you leave. It's nice to know when I'm helping someone. I've had a number of people tell me that I've helped pull them out of a slump or taught them something that helped them with a problem they were having. That kind of stuff makes a teacher really happy, so thank you for that. Thank you also for the financial support in the way of super thanks and buy me a coffees and buying my merch or buying my ebooks. That stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do this without your help, so thank you for that. All right, well, let's do some embossing or debossing. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. I like them because I can keep track of the projects that I'm working on at any given time, and then I have a permanent record of what I've made, so I know how I did it if I want to repeat it. The other thing about them is they have these nice dot matrix in the background, which I find pretty handy with keeping me more symmetrical, as that's not my strongest suit. All of the different types have different information on them. This one has a gauge to inches to millimeters chart, which I find pretty handy. There's some other silversmithing information on some of the other ones. So you should get some. They're handy and a good way to keep track of your projects in the past. Okay, so here's what I had in mind. I drew out some letters. Since I'm not making this for a specific person or something, you could do initials or some other kind of message, like I love you or something, if you're giving it to someone who you care about. I just am doing a generic positive message of peace. And so I drew out some letters, and you know, they're not perfect, but I tried to keep them as symmetrical as I could and kind of in the same size range. That's one of those dot matrix thing helps with that kind of stuff. And what I did was I traced them and I transferred them. I traced them and transferred them over onto this piece of brass here, because what we're going to do is we're basically going to make a layer of brass with these letters soldered onto it. But before we do that, we have to cut these out with a saw so we get them as neat as we can. But I have this piece of brass sheet here that we can solder them to. Cut a little piece off of there. So we have raised letters. And then what we'll do is we'll get a piece of soft copper that's about 18 gauge. And we'll make a little sandwich with that in this one. And I'm going to put a piece of some uncorrugated cardboard behind the piece of copper so it has a little bit of give behind it. And then we'll tape it up and run it through the rolling mill. And it should impress those letters in there nicely. I did a couple of trial things. So this one's been run through the rolling mill twice, so it's got a little bit flatter than it started. But it was pretty symmetrical when we first started. And first I got a nice impressed C there, which is pretty sharp and well defined. Then I thought, you know what, it might be kind of cool if you did a texture and then impressed it through it. So I did that one, and I kind of like that it stands out even more. So just a variation you could do if you wanted to. I think there's a lot of possibilities for this. You know, people like those little name bracelets and things. You could make one little name bracelet with someone's initials on it. So we're going to have to do, when we roll it through the rolling mill, it's going to give a reverse impression. So what we need to do is we need to solder these letters on upside down and backwards, and then we'll roll it through the rolling mill, and that should give us a nice clean thing. So we'll see. I think first we need to go cut these letters out, so I'm going to drill some start holes here and there so that we can keep them inside when we're sawing. Rather than coming in from the side, which will make the whole thing a little flimsy, we're going to start and stay inside of this piece of sheet when we're cutting these out. So I'll drill a little tiny hole in the E's and the A's and the P, and then a hole right next to each one of these two to make it easy to cut out each letter individually, if that makes sense. This is 18 gauge brass sheet, and I'm going to use 18 gauge copper sheet for this. I may put a little border on it. I have some, the electrician left some of this wire when he was working on our house a few weeks back, and I might use some of this 12 gauge copper wire as a border around it. And then we'll add some little rings for so you can hook a chain to it. So yeah, I think it should work out pretty well. I measured the gap that I ended up with in my rolling mill with the layers that I'm going to create here, and it was about a 2.75 millimeters. Oh, and 12 gauge round is 2 millimeter wire, 18 gauge sheet is 1 millimeter thick or so. I think that's everything. Here's my setup. I'll put it up there for you. And let's get started cutting some letters out. So I'm just drilling some holes after I made some little dimples using the ball burr. I have a 00 on here. Let's see how our sawing skills are tonight. I'm not sure who the we is there. Yeah. If you're new to sawing, it's best to, if you're, rather than turning the saw, if you can turn the piece, you generally break fewer blades. Okay, that was an example of crawling around on the floor looking for something you dropped. That's not bad. I can neaten it up with the file, and I think it should turn out to be a pretty good pea. Let's do the next one. So I think I'm going to spend a few minutes using my, like this E is much bigger than that E, so that's going to have to get a little closer. If I can't make them to look pretty close together, I will have to cut a second one, or a third one I should say. E. So like that. So actually after I get these cleaned up, I'm going to be soldering them down like because we'll be using this as a kind of like when they're doing printing on a printer, an old-fashioned one where you have raised letters and you cover them with ink, but in this case we're actually going to press those raised letters down into some metal to create an impression. So after you watch this video, you're going to be the boss of debossing. Oh god, that was a dad joke, wasn't it? Okay, so I'm going to file these up a little bit. Supposing I can find my files. Oopsie. That's not a bad P. That's not terrible. Where's my little needle file? There you are. I'm going to be doing this for a little while, so I'll be back in a minute. Hopefully these will all be cleaned up and kind of how I want them to look. And if I mess any up too badly, I can, without making you watch me again, cut a new one out. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, hopefully you can see that. They're facing backwards, and we need to mount them on a piece of brass, which I just cut. So I'm going to scribe a line on it, so we have a nice straight line to solder them down next to. Supposing I can find my calibrator. That way then we can That'll kind of center them, I think. So let's do that. Here's the piece of copper I'm going to impress it into, so I'll have to flatten that back out. But first, before we do that, we're going to solder these on here. I think I'm just going to use extra easy solder because I never use that, so I have lots of it. And it doesn't really matter on this one in any way that I can tell. It worked fine when I did that on the prototype piece just a minute ago. I've experimented with this over the years. I've never done it exactly this way before, so this will be a fun test. All right. Oops. Where'd that go? Okay, so I want the P to face that way, so we need the solder on this side. My fingers are clunky for this kind of stuff. All right. Well, I think let's try it and see what happens. So we want to get it hot enough to where everything solders down. Now, the problem with this is the smaller ones on top will get hot pretty easily because there's not as much mass, but the big piece on the bottom may give us some problems, so we're going to focus most of the heat on the big piece. I'm going to keep my pick in my hand in case I need to move anything back into position. Sometimes when you have sheet sitting on top of sheet being soldered down to it, it kind of skates around on the surface a little bit. Alright, I'm going to let that cool for a minute. I'm probably going to polish the tops of those letters so that we have a nice, clean, even surface. I see one of them is raised up on the tip a little bit. I'll squeeze that back down. So hopefully that'll work out okay. Okay, I'm going to try and clean that up really nice. So, be right back. Okay, got this all shiny. And I got this flattened out pretty well. I'm going to cut a piece of tag board, that thin uncorrugated cardboard, which I'm going to put behind the copper in order that it has a little give on the back side. So I think, let's do it this way. Probably should polish this piece of copper first, but kind of on a time schedule. Pretty tight. Trying to have the same thickness of tape across the entire piece, that way I won't have a thicker spot or anything like that, if that makes any sense. Plus it'll hold it pretty tightly encapsulated, I think, so it doesn't move around a lot. I thought about doing my name for the example, but what am I going to do with the Chad pendant? I have to wait for just the right customer on that one, I guess. I guess I could wear it so I don't, in case I forget who I am. I think it would make for nice, like, initials or something, kind of like a monogram sort of thing. Do some interesting stuff. I'll have to think about it, but there's probably a lot of things you could do in addition to letters. You know, sandwich this way, solder down, to create a negative impression of something, which is sometimes a desirable thing. So, all right, well, let's go roll this through and see how it turns out. Remember, I set the rolling mill to about a 2.75 millimeter gap. All right, here goes nothing. Okay, now for the big reveal. That turned out pretty good, actually. I'm pleased. All right. I'm going to do a little pre-polishing on that and then maybe put a border on it and some rings. And we'll get some good pictures of it. So here's our final product. It's not perfect, but I think it's a pretty good representation of what you can do as far as debossing some letters into some sheet. This would work for silver as well. You just want to make sure your silver's annealed really well, so it's nice and soft. And you know, I think it's kind of a cool technique. I like it. I'll use it again, and I hope you found something useful out of it. Let me know what you think. I'm always curious whether you think things are a success or not, and whether you think it's a valuable kind of thing to do. So let me know what you think. Alright, well that was how to use your rolling mill to do some embossing with letters, and you could also do shapes or things like that if you wanted to. It's a nice way to put a pretty deep impression into something. So if you did find it useful or interesting, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button for me. That helps to get my channel promoted. And it would be great if you went back and checked out my main channel page on YouTube here. I have 550 plus videos now. I do 3 per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. And so there's a ton of content over there at all different skill levels, I think, as well as some different tutorials that teach you how to do different things. So check those out. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps out the channel if you do. So we're real close to 25,000, and if you'll notice, I have that there's a blank spot on the wall that I covered with a tote bag behind me, and I'd really like to put one of those 100,000 subscriber YouTube plaques up there. So tell your friends. Check out the video description down below for information about this video, as well as some important links, including a link to my Patreon, which has multiple tiers of membership, the lowest being just getting rid of YouTube advertisement, and the other one's having some additional perks. It's a great place with a lot of cool people. So check it out. There's a link to my ebooks, particularly my 2024 ebook, and that is a guide to the various videos I published last year. There's 170 plus, and each one has a page with a link to the video, a picture of the original sketch I drew, a picture of the final outcome, a list of materials it took to make that project, a difficulty rating, and then some notes I made about the project, whether I learned something from it, whether I would do it differently if I was to do it again, if I liked the project and the outcome, if I didn't, because I don't always, and how I might change it in the future if I was to do that. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a really nice way to support my channel. So thanks in advance if you choose to buy that. You can even get both of them for a discount if you get the packaged one. A reminder that on the 21st through the 21st of November through December 5th, we're having a sale on both the merch store and my website, which has a few different things on it. It's going to be 20% off during that time period. If you're boycotting online purchases during part of that period, that's okay with me. That's why we made it extra long, so you can do it outside of the window of that. Get yourself some fun presents, or some presents for some of your loved ones. And thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.